Hey everyone. Haven't made a video for a while. I didn't think Crucible was very appropriate for it since the main mechanic, I assumed from the beginning, wasn't going to go core, and so nothing that I talked about would be reproducible in the future, and that ended up being correct, so I didn't make any video. Also been very busy, but this league I did want to make a couple videos about some of the builds. They were pretty neat and very successful, especially for meme builds. Extremely successful as far as that stuff goes. And I had a couple people reach out to me that randomly found me on PoE Ninja. Looking around, they must have seen that level 97 Alchemist mark. It was also really I it was I stumbled into Void Sphere working for the lead mechanic because I just randomly happened to be using it anyways from day one. So I was able to get rank 2000 in the league mechanic a couple days in. Uh, Now I don't, at the time of this recording, don't know if Void Sphere will still be abusable in the league mechanic, but try it out if you haven't, and you can buff it up using a Diala's and enhance and Phantasmal Void Sphere makes this build has 250% and with the gear swap 300% AoE makes Void Sphere just laughable for clearing the league content. So try that out if you haven't. So I've got two builds I want to talk about, as well as a hideout that I made with that I'm excited. I won't talk about it here in this video, though I'm just letting you know there will be other videos up soon if you're interested in that stuff. Um, Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and play the gameplay section of this video in the background now. I'll chat a little bit about it while it's playing, and feel free to jump around the video. It should be tagged and marked below into relevant sections, so you don't have to listen to me talk too much. So right off, you can see and probably know already from the title of the video, this is an Alchemist Mark build. We're leveraging Vol Flame Blast in order, it should be the single highest damage skill in the game for it. To be leveraged, we're using the new Sadism support gem because it fixes a lot of problems with this. I already made this similar build to this back when Alchemist Mark was first introduced, but you had to go all over the place in order to make it work, and that took way too much investment. Now you can do it all with one skill gem that they seemingly added for this exact purpose. So great. Sadism fixes a lot of problems with it, and we can focus on better things. Here in the background, you can see that the 250% AoE really makes very large pools of 10-second long Alchemist Mark, which get boosted by the 5 low tolerances, so 1500% increased damage, 100 to 10% more damage uh, per level or rank of Flame Blast. So it gets 15 charges here, so 110% times 15. Very large damage multipliers. This is an, you know, fairly that was a Drox that was being witnessed and healed by Maven, so pretty high damage. I had no problem taking down any end boss. I don't think I died once during any of my first encounters with end game bosses. I think I've got a couple other. Every other boss in this video is going to be at least tier 16, but you'll see, like, I think I put in an Eradicator and a Searing Exarch in here, so that you can see the Searing Exarch wasn't optimized. It was very early on in the build, but it was still deathless and very quick. So you can see the surprising potential. I'll shut up now and let you watch the video for the gameplay section. If you want an actual in-depth dive on the mechanics, there'll be a section in that you can jump to in the video. Enjoy. This is just a generalized section going over the build mechanics. So let me talk real quick about what we're trying to do, what the build's about, and how it functions. So basically, we are utilizing the new skill gem, Divergent Sadism. This build used to be possible to make, but it was very difficult because you had to go all over the map in order to find every source of reducing the duration of poison that you could. Now you can do it all with basically one gem. Divergent Sadism seems to be purpose made for this task. So we're utilizing it to reduce the duration of the poison that we get from Flame Blast. We're using Vol Flame Blast because it's pretty much the single highest damage multiplier in the game. We can then scale our poison damage using low tolerance plus the more damage with ailments multiplier on Vol Flame Blast to get that last 15 stage damage multiplier tick, and then scale that from the 0.1 second poison on the monster all the way up to a 10-second Alchemist mark that covers most of your screen. That's the entire idea behind the build. We've got this just one button nuke that we can click and it sits on the screen and kills everything that it touches. Now, the mechanics that make this slightly difficult to min-max are not only, yes, do you need to get the duration of the poison down, which is easily solved through sadism, but another aspect of this is you really want to avoid cast speed, or you need to hit certain thresholds with it. And the reason why is that cast speed impacts Vol Flame Blast in such a way that the more cast speed that you have, the faster the explosions occur, since it's technically a channeling skill. The problem with Vol Flame Blast being faster isn't that the overlaps are, the explosions are touching each other and canceling out our low tolerance. No, that's not the problem. Our poisons are so short that low tolerance will always trigger, regardless of how fast you get your Flame Blast. Our poisons are gone within milliseconds of applying. The server tick rate is easily hit with that. Instead, the challenge is Alchemist Mark. Alchemist Mark can trigger once a second. says can create ground effect no more than once each second. So in order to get something like Vol Flame Blast to work properly, because the entire concept here is we want the first explosion to hit, because we have no choice with that, and then we want the very last explosion to hit. And through my testing of frame recording data, it appears that Vol Flame Blast, the first explosion ticks, and then with 0 cast speed, exactly 2 seconds later, the last one will hit. And that means that your Alchemist mark should create 3 pools of poison. They should, you'll at least get 2. The third is only dependent on the third explosion being exactly at 1 second, which I found it isn't always the case. But the idea here is that if you do get any cast speed, that first and last explosion will no longer be 2 seconds apart. Now, if you have exactly 50% cast speed, this also works, but on a time scale of 1 second instead of 2 seconds, which is actually better. But then you have to invest in 50%, and you have to get exactly 50%. If you go over or under that, you're screwing this up, and you will no longer be optimizing your damage for getting that 15-stage Flame Blast. And just to have a visual of what I'm talking about here, I'll cast Flame Blast. So right there, you can see, if you're not familiar with Vol Flame Blast, how it works. We get 5 explosions. At time 0, we have an explosion, and then at 2 seconds, we have our last explosion. And Alchemist Mark will only trigger once every second. So that's the dance that we're trying to go with there. Now, obviously, for the purpose of using other spells, not having any cast speed kind of sucks. So instead, for our clear skill, what we're using on this build is Void Sphere. This build does a lot of damage, so Void Sphere has absolutely no problem clearing content. We have a very large AoE. Void Sphere is great for multiple reasons. It sucks in the entire screen and keeps those enemies away from you, and it also decimates them. Everything except the strongest rares will die from Alchemist Mark and Void Sphere. No problem. It's very, very reliable and a very fun and different, honestly, play style going between Void Sphere and Vol Flame Blast. So those are the main mechanics that we're going with there. Now, luckily, Alchemist Mark being a mark, there are mark cast speed nodes around that you can get that massively increase the cast speed, or you can just get rid of some of the duration or AoE on your Alchemist Mark for your support gems, and instead replace it with faster casting, just to make it a little bit faster at casting. I am self-casting Alchemist Mark. I don't think that there's a good, reliable way to trigger it. I don't think it's not worth the downside. Any of the way that you can manage to trigger Alchemist Mark, it just, there's too much that you have to invest in order to do that. I don't think it's worthwhile. Casting it by hand isn't too bad, especially since we're doing so little otherwise with this build. We're just pressing a button every couple seconds or so. It's not difficult to keep your Alchemist Mark up, especially since we're taking a mastery that makes it so that it transfers automatically to nearby enemies. So that's the entire idea behind the build. Get poisons very low duration, boost the damage with we have 4 low tolerance as well as the poison mastery that gives basically a 5th low tolerance. So 1500% increased poison damage, 110% more per stage times 15. That's a lot of overall damage. It's a ton of damage. The build is capable of very easy bossing, very easy endgame bossing. It's not super fast at mapping because it doesn't have very good run speed with this build. You can certainly take away some of the damage, some of the points I've put into that. When I go over them in the tree section, you'll see you can modify the tree to be a little faster if you'd rather be a little bit faster at mapping. Or, there's a lot of ways to go with this build, but it is very functional. I've been very impressed by it, and those are the mechanics. Alright, let's go over the gem setup real quickly. So, in the helm, we're using Anomalous Intensify for the additional AoE, as well as increased AoE, increased duration support with Alchemist Mark. This is just to make Alchemist Mark larger and last longer, and uh, the reason we want to do that is because Alchemist Mark can't be supported really by anything else. You can really you can't attach damage supports, so you might as well increase it where you can. Next, in our lore weave, we have an enhance, efficacy, cruelty, phantasmal void sphere. You might also want to go with the one that lowers its cooldown instead, but I like having the additional pulse frequency. It's very nice for pulling enemies in, especially in this league mechanic. I got to rank 2000 on the league mechanic by day 4, which was pretty nice. I didn't at that time. I didn't see that anybody else was using Void Sphere. I don't know why, but it's great for it. If you haven't tried it, try it. We've got an Empower here and a Sadism. Now, Sadism is a large part of this build. We're using it in both the Void Sphere and the Vol Flame Blast, and the reason for that is this build was possible. I have another build from back when Alchemist Mark was first introduced. I built this out as well, but it was much harder to get your poisons to as low a duration as you needed to make this work. Sadism completely fixes this entire problem, and I don't even know why else they introduced it. It's almost like they introduced Sadism specifically to do this. So I'm going to go with that, and that's why we're using it. This allows, with Sadism alone, and I mean now along with Volkurs, with Sadism and Volkurs, poison gets below 0.2 seconds, which is a great threshold for doing things with low tolerance. Down in our boots, I've got a portal there. You can switch it out for anything. It would be nice to have a guard skill on this build. I recommend it since we are pretty weak to physical damage. So either Steel Skin, or just any guard skill of your choice, really. We've got Divergent, Herald of Agony. Divergent's important. It gives us our extra chance to poison on hit. So that, in combination with the poison wheel that I'll be going over on the skill tree, is what fills out the majority of our poison, and then there's a Curse Mastery to get that last 20%. I'm running Flame Dash and Herald of Ash. Herald of Ash is interesting on this build because we're utilizing every aspect of it. We do use Void Sphere, so we do get 15% of our physical as extra fire, and we also utilize the 12% more spell fire damage for our Vol Flame Blast, so it's kind of an interesting use case for it. Over on our gloves, we're using Decoy Totem. It's just a nice way of luring enemies to a single location when your Void Sphere is down. The worst part about using a build with Vol Flame Blast is corralling enemies. In 2023, monsters are very quick in Path of Exile, so the additional way to suck them to one spot is just very useful. We've got Enfeeble set up with Blasphemy. I like using Enfeeble on Blasphemy. I don't like using Enfeeble on Hit because normally this is one of our main defensive layers. We do have multiple on this build, but in order to really rely on Enfeeble, it needs to always be on the enemy, and trying to hit your enemies before they hit you is just not something that's always going to work. So I have it set up on a Blasphemy here. And then Malevolence for our last slot. Now coming up to our Widow Hail, this is where we've got our Vol Flame Blast. We're linking it with Divergent Sadism and Divergent just to get that extra bit of damage over time multiplier. And also, even the downside is good for us. It reduces the duration, an extra 30%. We've got an Empower in here. We've got added Chaos, Awakened added Chaos damage support, Swift Affliction support, and a Deadly Ailment support, which these things are also aiding in reducing that duration. Our poison duration is very, very low, so there's absolutely no chance that when we go to use Vol Flame Blast that the poisons are still there from the last explosion from Vol Flame Blast. This guarantees that low tolerance will trigger on every single individual explosion and guarantee maximum damage there. All right, let's chat about the skill tree real quickly. As we open up here, and if you followed any of my builds before, you'll notice I like to do this. It's good early league because these Might of the Meek are cheap. So we're Scion, we go with Might of the Meek. This allows us to get several things that are nice for the build. It allows us to fill out some easy resistances. It allows us to get a decent amount of physical damage for Void Sphere, not that that matters too much. It gives us a large chunk of life. It gives us a little bit of mana reservation for our curse auras. But the main benefit of doing this is the area of effect. This is, as far as I know, the easiest way to get a massive amount of area of effect. It gives 84% with these 3 nodes if you're using 3 Might of the Meek in this location. And that's all we do with this area, because anything else is really wasted points. If we have to exit this area because we're using these Might of the Meeks, we're hitting these notables that give us nothing. So instead, since we're Scion, we get to go out from the Ranger here. You'll notice a whole bunch of tattoos, and what we're doing with these tattoos is for the dex ones, we're increasing the effect of our marks everywhere that we can. We do grab 10% increased flash charges right here because with the rest of this build we have exactly 90%, so this last 10% fills us up and gives us that 100% so that we can double the effect of the Trader Keystone that we'll get to here in a second. This node, this little node right here gives us a nice amount of also mark effect. The mark mastery that I like to take here is marks transfer to enemy when marked enemy dies. This is just nice for mapping, is really what it's good for. Up here we have a Warrior's Tail, which increases the effect of our tattoos by 100%. This allows us to fill all of these small nodes out and get a lot more mark effect. In this area here we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So an additional 80% mark effect, which is very big. We're just grabbing life where we need it. Again, up here we've got some more mark effect tattoos. Now, this build uses, you'll notice, 2 clusters for cluster jewels. We're using a large, I just went with the elemental damage one because that will work to scale your poison damage when using Vol Flame Blast. The reason just why is this widespread destruction is really easy to get and gives some more area of effect. Not a lot, but it's something. But the main things here, the things that you need to either roll or buy, are these medium. We're using 4 of these medium cluster jewels. Each one has Brood for potency for 1, so that we get a nice chunk of damage over time, as well as increased flash charges. And then on the other end, we have our low tolerance, which is the main, where we're getting the main chunk of our damage for this build from. On this one down here, on the small node, we have a Mortifying Aspect in order to gain that Malevolence increased mana reservation so that we can make use of all of our mana. And then up on this low tolerance and Brood potency, we have a Hound's Mark, because that's additional mark effect. It's great. So an extra 22% here. Moving up, we've got our Brutal Restraint, which is giving us the Trader, which then gets multiplied by 2 because of the flash charge, 100% flash charges gained. So this is giving us 8 flash charges every 5 seconds so that we can easily maintain Vol Flame Blast when we need it. Up here, you'll notice that I'm using a bunch of these +4 to all attributes tattoos. I find this league is very nice for being able to make builds meet attribute requirements, because you get so many of these +4 to all attributes, you can really use them wherever you need them. And so that's how we're getting our dex requirement with that, while still being able to use all of our dex nodes for mark effect, because we come up here and we turn the intelligence ones into all stats. So we jump up here, we grab our Whispers of Doom to get our additional curse, and then we get our curse mastery, which gives us the last percentage that we need in order to have 100% poison chance, which is important. Right now, I'm coming down here and grabbing this extra 30% AoE. And same thing for clusters, exact same cluster setup as we had down below, and also grabbing Eldritch Battery in order to have a way to easily cast while still being able to reserve all of our mana. Now, that pretty much covers the entire tree. The only things that I would consider changing are I'll probably at some point drop the AoE cluster here. We already have a lot of AoE. If we check it out right here, it says that our skill area of effect modifier is 244%. Not too shabby. It makes everything that we have very large. So for this section, we're looking at gearing. This build uses actually mostly uniques, with a couple items outside of that that you have a little bit of room. Actually, there's a lot of room depending on how you want to do this, but based on how I did it, it's mostly uniques. Now, I would decide to go with Eternal Damnation as a defensive layer here. You'll notice that I have Aspect of Stone on there, which is 20% chance to avoid physical damage from hits. We're using that in combination with a mod on this Vile Arrow Quiver that gives 10% chance to avoid physical damage from hits, which is then scaled by a 2.5x multiplier. So all in all, we actually have 55% chance to avoid physical damage from hits. The Vile Arrow Quiver also has plus 400 armor and evasion rating, which is then multiplied as well by 2.5 times. This is where we're getting most of our physical mitigation from. That being said, even with the 55% chance to avoid and the armor and evasion here, we're still pretty rough on physical defense. Now, as a result, I don't think this is the right way to go. I was just I hadn't really made too many Eternal Damnation builds, and this was the only way to throw this on top of that I could think of to easily throw on top of Eternal Damnation in order to get some nice physical mitigation. I really think this build would benefit from going the route of like a Lightning Coil, because it really is hurt by the physical side of things. That being said, we are sitting at, because of using Lore Weave along with Eternal Damnation, we are sitting at 78 on every resistance, including Chaos, and obviously Eternal Damnation gives us half of our Chaos as additional elemental mitigation. So for those things, it's actually a pretty defensive. Now, as I said before, we're using Widow Hail. The main reason for using Widow Hail here is there's a mod that you can roll with an essence to get 25% increased effect of your marks on a quiver. So obviously 25% times 2.5 is giving us roughly like 87% increased effect of marks, which is huge. And on top of that, for our Void Sphere, we're gaining 15% of physical damage as chaos damage multiplied by 2.5, which is coming out again to roughly like 52% of physical damage as extra chaos damage, which is huge. And I somehow got a perfect roll on the armor and evasion rating on this, which is really nice. I will say this is a difficult to craft quiver. You have to spam essence on a Redeemer Vile Arrow Quiver and hope for the best. I then got some lucky uh, removal of mod. Well, I got the mods I needed. I did suffixes can't be changed, and then I did the Veiled Chaos Orb in order to get the 400 armor and evasion rating on here because I really did want to buff those defenses. Now, because we are using Eternal Damnation, we're just using some rings here that have a lot of resistances and a lot of chaos resistance. We have to hit that chaos resistance cap. Same thing with the boots. They're really not great boots. The main thing here is, again, just chaos resistance. We're using the Magnate mostly for filling out resistances as well as getting a bit of chunk of strength to meet those stat requirements that we need, and also to get the 50% increased flask charges gain, which is important for this build because we want to reach the 100% increased flask charges gain to use with the trader in order to be getting a reliable amount of charges for our Soul Ripper. For the gloves, we're using Volker's Guidance because we need a way to make our fire damage poison. And lastly, we're using Doedri's Scorn. This is another optional part of the build. It's got a lot of nice stats for us. It's got a lot of additional flat chaos damage, which is a nice scaler. It has curse skill effect for our Alchemist mark, as well as a couple of levels to curse gems, and I'm sticking our Alchemist mark in the helm here, as well as this one here has the Alchemist mark curse effect of 30% additional. All in all, this gives us a grand total right now of 330% increased curse effect, which is huge. A very large damage multiplier for the build. If you're wondering where we're getting the extra curse effect, I will go over that in the section, or maybe I've already gone over it, depending on how I ordered these, the section where we go over the skill tree on this build. The last things I want to note is we're missing a couple flasks because we are using the trader, and the most important thing as far as flasks go is our Soul Ripper, which is this one is 31 charges, and the reason for that is Vol Flame Blast requires 30 charges, so you want to get as close to that number as possible. Well, at least 30, and then as not going too far over that, because those will just be wasted charges that you have to fill out in order to use the flask. All right, well, that pretty much covers it. I'll put a POB down below, but that's just going to include the character as an import. I'm not going to put anything special in there, so if you have any questions, put them down below. And like I said, I'll have a couple more videos coming. One will cover another character I did, and the other will be a hideout. The character covers a mechanic that I find interesting. I haven't really ever seen used, but I've covered it before. But it did get buffed significantly by tattoos. It involves Eternal Youth and a lot of energy shield stacking, and another unique that never really gets used. But it allows for a ridiculous amount of life recovery. So feel free to keep an eye out for that, and have a good one.